almost ready. I'm trying to find it on my channel. I can't find it. Oh, wait, there we are. In the live Q&A. Okay, so you're going to do the questions then?
Sure, I'll read questions. Make it easy.
Just a second, and we'll start explaining what everything is, what all's happening. I did Kyle Dunnigan's thing last night.
I was going to watch that last night. I went to bed too early.
Sliced alone. It got so funny, man.
Okay.
I'm going to get rid of my gum. I get so much hassle for that, man, for spitting out my gum. There's a garbage can here. I guess people think I'm spitting in the floor. I'm a heathen.
Didn't your teacher get you out of the habit?
Well, my
20 years in
eighth
the
grade,
Army, chewing gum.
No, in the 8th grade, I had this English teacher, and she told me I was a heathen. We were throwing stuff.
The word up?
No, you know.
And we're live. It's 3 o'clock.
All right. Well, welcome to the Body Language Membership live Q&A. And today we're going to start answering questions from people inside the membership. And for those of you on YouTube, if you want to be a part of that and we'll answer your questions, go check out bodylanguagemembership.com. If you become a member of that, you get in the community, and we'll answer your questions there. So, and we do this, we're trying to do it once a week.
Yep.
So we may end up we've got a lot of scheduling stuff coming up. So we may miss one or two here or there, but we're going to do it pretty much every week. We'll get a chance.
Yeah, a couple of things to point out. If you're not in Body Language Membership and you hear us talking about something that sounds odd, it's probably something going on inside the community where people are asking questions and we're batting things back and forth. So you have to pardon us if it doesn't make sense to you. But for the most part, we'll keep those questions clean enough you can also understand if you're outside here. Thank you to everybody from the Body Language Membership, because you get some great questions. Weekly, I'm going in and seeing my name pinged and going to answering things I've seen, or just in a discussion, and they're fun to do.
Yeah. All right. So Greg's getting over some cough and things.
Yeah, I'm almost done with this cough finally. I've had it for a year.
It's not COVID.
No, it's not COVID. I've been tested.
Let's do the first question.
Yep, first question. I'm just going to jump in. Kim asks, hi guys, curious to know how you choose the topics for the behavior panel. I'd love to see you do a Casey Anthony case, looking at the body language of Casey and her parents. Another case I'm interested in is the case of Kyron Horman, a 10-year-old Oregon boy who went missing in 2010. I'll just give you a quick one here. People who are on YouTube will appreciate this as well. That's a chore. Candidly, I hate pop culture. I don't care much about it. And my mornings either start with murder. I call it coffee and mayhem. I wake up in the morning, get a cup of coffee, sit and watch these things on Saturday or Sunday. And I start with popculture.com to look and see what's going on in the world that matters to people. And if there's nothing there, then I move to the news. I look in the news to find out what's hot and what's happening. And then I walk from there into unsolved cases, whatever, and it just depends. It's a mix, what looks interesting. But you have to also have some decent body language and good video. So it takes a little bit of effort. Then Scott and I hop on the phone. We talk about, hey, does this look good? And then I'll send Scott the link with some timestamps, and he's the guy who does all the cutting this up and puts it in the box. So we're the production crew and the editing crew. That's how this thing works today.
Yeah. We're the ones that find the video. And so sometimes Greg will call up and go, listen, man, I don't think we can do these again this week because it's those things are fairly graphic. We would try to stay away from them because after a while, you're going to take so much. So that's the way it goes. And then we put everything I'll cut everything up, make sure we got all of our the spots that Greg and I think are good for us to go over, and then put them in a Dropbox. Everybody downloads that and from the Dropbox, and we watch them, and then we record. So that's the way it works.
Yep. A couple of others. Aaron, I'm going to run down these and I'll go back and come back in. I've decided to read because I can read and do this at the same time a lot easier. So Aaron Chase says, what's the deal when someone has their eyebrows up almost constantly when speaking? It's so annoying. I want to smack them in the forehead. Interestingly, it just is a habit. Remember, everything, and Scott, I'll let you answer as well, everything people do, if it's playing with their fingernails, twirling their hair, raising their forehead, whatever it is, it can become a habit too. That's the thing about adapters. They can become habits. So when a person's always holding their forehead up, you'll notice because they'll always have wrinkles associated with it as well. And it's just something that becomes a habit for people. People can turn anything into a habit.
I think you nailed it on that one. I got nothing to add.
Okay. Nicole asks, question for Scott. From my understanding, you train healthcare professionals about body language. Do you have any wisdom or interesting techniques that you can share? Thanks so much.
Yeah. There's Greg and I have this thing called the liar's loop, and from the liar's loop, I thought, wow, there's got to be something in healthcare for that. So I came up with the patient engagement loop. It's not like the liar's loop; it's just the idea of putting things in a little loop and having steps for them. And it's all the things I taught before, but and so I call it the patient engagement loop because it deals when you're in healthcare, you're dealing with. I had thyroid cancer and had to go through the whole healthcare system, and most of it was fine, but there's a couple parts of it were a little bumpy. So my father's a doctor, so I always hear him talking about how they handled things, and they never had any problems at all with being sued or anything. And that's one of the things that happens a lot in healthcare, as you probably know. Doctors get sued right and left all the time these days. So the key is getting rid of the those. Giving those people the feeling they want to sue their doctor. So there's a way to connect with the patient as soon as they walk in the door and say hello to whoever the receptionist is, how they connect with them, and the things that in other words, the office does to connect with this person, and then the person coming out, be it the nurse or the physician's assistant, whoever it is that connects with them and takes them back to their room, examination room, and all those things in between that you do, and for the doctor to do as well. So I've gotten all that in this little loop, and it's going like gangbusters. It's going really well. So that's basically it. I mean, I do an hour and a half talk on it, but in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's called the patient engagement loop. You can go look at the talk at scottrouse.com. If you'll go and say, speaking, and it shows some of the topics I'm talk on, and I think it's in there too as well. So
Scott, I will need your help at some point when I move I'm actually going to stand my YouTube channel up and pull everything over there.
Yes.
Because I got a ton of stuff from the past 20 years that I just don't have up there. Jenna asked a great question. General interest in body language seems to skew female. Why do we see more male experts in the career field? And I'll give you my opinion. Scott, you can give yours. It's just that more of us are in those career fields that allowed us to learn about it. For example, if you're in the Army, and there are more men than women in the Army, and you end up in that situation like I did where mine comes from, that's kind of how it goes. There are a lot of women who come out of that field. There are a lot of folks out there who come from ATF, or like Lena comes from the Navy, or I have a friend, Dora, who comes from the Army, who are still doing this stuff. But most of us in those combat-related units in the past were male. And the ones who are there now, who are women, have not come out yet, and they can't talk about this stuff in public. So as soon as they get there, then you'll see more of them. I think that's kind of the way to look at it. And we're trying to grow the base and get more people from the trades, if you will, to come out here and talk. I think it's an important part of getting a mix. The more varied our experience to come to the body language thing, the better you're going to see performance.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times guys become interested in that because of girls. We want to know what y'all are thinking. Yeah, so when that happens, then you've got people trying to understand body language from the dating aspect, which is a popular thing, and usually that's where the women start in that. Some of the women that I know that are in this field, they've started like, I started talking about dating, and this is like, wow. So they'll write a book about it, or they'll give talks about it, or go talk to companies or something about it. So I think that might be one reason that guys get into it a lot earlier. I got into it because I was interested in people and what they were doing. So mine was a little bit different than that. But I don't know a whole bunch of women in it, but there are quite a few. There are quite a few, but I don't think most of them don't go as in depth as we do. I think it's a lot of it will stay on, almost surface stuff before it goes down to the studies and all those types of things. Again, going back to Greg's thing, most of the guys in this come out of a situation where you were put in that a long time ago, or started a long time ago, and some people just started 5 years ago or 2 years ago or something. So, but I don't know. Shoot, who knows?
Yeah, no, I think it like everything, as people go into new fields that are not that have been traditionally more male, you'll run into a lot more people coming into this field because they're going into places where they're in harm's way, learning these skills and using that, and it just is what it is. I think I think. Go look at Guru's top 30. There are a lot of really, really talented women in the field in that list. And I think it's worth looking at that list and saying, hey, how do they speak to you? The other thing is body language, all of us come at it from different angles. I think it's what makes it a good field. In time, we'll all be commoditized in some way and all move and talk exactly the same way because it'll be a career field. But the way we all get here now is through different paths. And it makes it a pretty cool thing that you get the Joe Navarro from FBI, Jack Schaefer from FBI. You get people like Jim Pyle from the Army, people like me from the Army, Chase from the Navy. You get ATF from Janine. You get and then like Tanya, you get people from all different walks of life, and you can't make a mistake learning along the way. Interrogation, as Hans Scharf famously said, is usually done best by people who have a broad general knowledge and no specialization, meaning the more stuff you know, the better off you are. And so that's what this is good for as well. The more people you've been exposed to, the wider your experiences, the more likely you are to notice things. For example, and then I'll stop here, Scott, if you've never been around a person who uses drugs, you miss a lot of that cue. If you've never been around a person who has some mental issue, you miss a lot of those cues. So it's about looking for all those deviations from normal. You know, humans aren't ever normal, but there's some kind of a model that you can say, well, that's kind of normal. All those deviations, you have to have been around a lot of it to see it. That's okay. Alicia asks, and Scott, I'll let you take this one. Do habits mean anything, or are habits simply something to identify when creating a baseline?
I guess you're talking about little tics and things people do. So those are part of the baseline. You pay attention to whatever that person's doing the first few minutes when you start talking to them, or before you start talking to them, how they look when they're talking to somebody else. What is their behavior like? Is it relaxed? Are they doing this when they're relaxed? Are they doing this when they're relaxed? And when they're just talking to someone, so it's almost like a little tic they're doing because they do it all the time. Because we see those as adapters. And when you ask someone a question, they start that. Is that something they've been doing? A lot of people don't take those things into consideration. That's why they're under the impression there are absolutes, which means this always means one thing, and this always means one thing, and this always means one thing, when they actually don't. You have to take everything into context with what's happening in real time. So, yeah, everything counts, and it's important to pay attention to those. But just be sure those things, when they travel over into the questioning time when you're dealing with them, if they get heavier, if they've been doing this the whole time, if they start doing this, making it huge, then you've got a change in behavior there in your baseline. So Greg's the baseline champ. You want to go on from there?
Sure. Yeah, it's that, right? And baseline can be very odd or very normal for the group of people you're around. If you ever notice with baseline, culture matters. I mean, they're very famously in the 1920s, and I'll forget the name of the salute, but there was a salute that children did in the U.S. when they were doing a Pledge of Allegiance. And it was the Roman salute that later was adopted by Hitler. And it went away rapidly because culture didn't tolerate it. But culture makes us do a lot of the things we do. A lot of us would behave differently if our parents didn't say, don't do that when we were children. Or if the business we worked in or our peers didn't stop us, we might do different body language. So you can see that has an impact on baseline. Your body itself has an impact on baseline. How nervous of a person you are may have an impact on baseline. Some people are jacked up all the time, and some people are really calm. I had a friend in New Jersey that if you ask him how he was doing, you get a 30-second pause while he thought about what you wanted from the question and answered it. It's his baseline. Just weird, but that's just how his brain worked. And so you have to take all that into account. And it's really easy for you to jump ahead and project onto that person they're not smart because they take too long to answer the question or that kind of thing. So your experiences are important, but you got to also temper your experiences and keep your eyes and ears and everything open. And that's really part of it. And I think that one feeds into the next one, Scott. Aaron asks, how do you curb your bias when observing or interviewing someone? You want to start? You want me to?
Yeah, I'll start. You go in, when you're going into an interrogation situation, you want to take your bias and set it way over there because you're dealing with a situation. Even if you go, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times, you haven't seen this 1,000 times. If you said, I know what these are, you don't know what these are. That person may be the person who looks the guiltiest person you've ever seen in your life, and you've always seen a guilty person do this or something. You go, I know what that means. No, you don't, because every person is different. Like every personality is different. Everybody looks different. Everybody you're talking to is different. There are similarities, but you've got to be able to say, oh, just because they're this or just because they're that, it doesn't mean they're guilty or innocent either. So when you go in, there's a protocol you follow, and you go right down that little road of what you're looking for and how to look for it. And if questions get answered this way, you want to go way down this way, but you want to keep it back over this way too, just to make sure you're going down the right road every time. I hope that makes sense. Greg?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. For me, the first thing to do is turn off anything you think about that particular person. I used to say when I was young, and people look at you really weird when you say this, I could talk to Charles Manson as easily as I could talk to the ice cream guy. I'm not talking to them about things. I'm talking about them. And I want to know why with all people. If you can turn off whatever it is that makes you biased, and all of us have to work at that, it's human nature, then you get the chance to discover something about that person. And, my wife would always tell you, I can talk to anybody. It's in my DNA. I can walk up and talk to anybody on the street. I'm comfortable with it. And I try, as much as humanly possible, not to jump to a conclusion about who they are, what they are, or how they're working. And if you do that, you'll be surprised what you learn about how people function. Most of us don't wake up in the morning trying to be bad people or do bad things. There are people who are wired poorly and do that without effort. But most of us, whether we are, and I won't talk about this in great detail, but whatever your politics is, if you can forget that it's, or if you can remember that it's just an illusion, that politics tomorrow could all go away and we would all be thinking something different, we'd find some other reason to divide and split. And if you can do that and remember the person that you liked is inside of all that red or blue or whatever it is that you hate, then you see a different approach. And you got to do the same thing when you're interrogating, when you're interviewing. You got to get to the bottom of why this happened. And some of you watched the video where I'm like being a bad guy in the interrogation stuff. If you watch that video, what you'll find is all of our pressure was about one thing, and that's about somebody else catching that guy and relieving the pressure. So trust is a powerful thing. I just say, keep it at trying to get to the person, not whatever the issue is that they've done, and it will let you be a lot less biased. Okay? Let's see. The limbic system, Bruce says, limbic system is what reveals our truth. So when you guys say you can't learn to lie and outsmart an interrogator, the body reveals the truth no matter who you are. Well, let me tell you, I'll jump on this one. One of the more interesting people I ever taught was an agency person, and I taught her body language for 8 hours, and then I had a whole hard time trying to get through her body language. So the way people's brains are wired affects some of that. Fight or flight is the piece that causes you to start raising, indicators. So things like adapters, barriers, illustrators, those things. But there's still other ways to catch a liar. Remember, interrogation is not about body language. Body language is a tool in an interrogator's bag. It's the reason Scott and I always say if you're 50% at reading and telling if somebody's lying, we're 60. We have to use tools. And those tools are things like good questioning. Jim Pyle's a master questioner, for example. We'll have him on here one day. We run down that path. It's good, solid questioning to create a trap a person can't get out of. Or psychological pressure. Psychological pressure forces a person into the corner and you open the door and they go out it. So it's all those pieces. And then it's timeline. For example, forward and backward pass on a timeline to find gaps. It's learning to listen for words like and then and after that. Jack Schaefer, Joe Navarro. It's all of those things that tie together to create lie detection. There's no simple answer in body language. And some people show real heightened fight or flight over nothing. If they've been through a bad experience and you start brushing up against it, that can also trigger some of the same behaviors. So it's not just the fight or flight, because you can learn to beat that. You can take Valium or some tranquilizer, whatever kind of thing, and it will certainly fix a lot of that for you. Scott, you want to throw in on that one?
I think you got all that too. I think you're good to go. I'm over here making sure I'm not missing anything. So...
All right. It's funny. That's just a funny one there. Hold on, I'll read it to you.
What was it?
Two people are talking about Robert Durst. Patricia, and I'll let you answer it if you want. I'm binge watching the Jinx documentary today, and I'm wondering why everyone seems so nice and speaks so nicely to Robert Durst. I'm pretty sure that I would be more provocative and aggressive with him. Would that be wrong? I'll let you start, and then I'll give my opinion.
I'm assuming you're talking about the guy in the doc that's is making the guy that's making the documentary, right. And that's because he's a documentarian, or whatever you call him. He's a film guy. He's trying to be nice to this guy because he doesn't know what interrogation is. He's never interrogated anybody. He's not there to interrogate him. He's there to document what's happened and try to get the full story of what's happened with this guy from the time those murders started up to now, I guess, and his whole life as well, because they go through that. So he's being nice to him because he's just a nice guy. And at the same time, that's another way of approaching those. On TV, you always see when people are interrogating somebody, and I always say they're always going, "Where's the girl?" and pounding on the table and hollering, "Don't tell me." It doesn't work that way because all that person has to say is, in that situation, 5 words: I want my lawyer now. That's fine. So it was just I want my lawyer. I had to add now. But so that's all they got to do. So you don't want them to feel like they're threatened and want to leave. There are situations where you do that. There are situations where you get beyond a point where being nice and just talking to them isn't going to work. So you have to be a little bit aggressive. There are differences when Greg is doing stuff. When you're dealing with terrorists, it's an entirely different situation. They can't say, I want my lawyer. But somebody like me dealing with somebody, go, yeah, I want my lawyer, man. I'm not going to say anything. And you go, okay, I'll see you later. So you got to be nice to him. And this guy wants to be nice because he wants to finish his movie. He doesn't want to make the guy mad and say, I'm out of here. I don't need this. So he's being nice to him. And he's doing a great job of it. He gets everything he needs from him and more by being nice. So it works just as well.
Yeah. Add to that, when you're talking to someone who is not a prisoner of war, who's not in cuffs, or who is not in jail, they can get up and walk out casually. A friend of mine who is a counterintelligence guy, where they're talking to people in the street, used to famously say, we'll have him on here as well. We're interviewing him either this week or next. As he would often say, the difference between your job and mine is your guy's in an orange jumpsuit and can't run away, and I'm talking to some average guy on the street. And that's a fundamental difference. You can alienate that guy and he can run away. I'll also say this. In the interrogation toolkit, now forget elicitation or other things, the 14 approved Army interrogation ploys or approaches include fear, but they're fear up mild, fear up harsh, and fear down. Fear down is the one you use the most. Fear down is most of the time you're dealing with a captured enemy, you want them to calm down so that you can talk to them, so you can get information. And I said often, and if you watch that video somebody posted last night, Scott put it in additional, what's it in, Scott?
New content.
New content. There's a video from the History Channel I did back in 2004 around world interrogation techniques, not necessarily U.S., pretty harsh at times. In there, if I'm screaming and yelling at you, it's to create pressure so you're not paying attention to the other thing I'm doing over here. It's a redirect. It's kind of like a magic trick. And while I'm doing this, I'm also doing some ploy or pushing you into the hands of someone else. So fear is not the best interrogation tool. The best interrogation tool is getting a person to a point that they know that there's no way to resist what you're doing. So that's my opinion.
Explain the fear up, fear down, because you talk about that and then they don't know.
Yeah.
You know, we're
so
used to
fear
talking
up,
about it.
quite simply, yeah, and I can talk about these in my sleep, of course, but fear up is I want to raise your fear level. There are 2 ways to do it. One is mild, where I may say to Scott, Scott, I know you've got drugs under the seat in your car. Do you really want me to call the police? Right? There you go. That's a fear up. And fear up harsh is the one that most people see, you're screaming and yelling and doing all that kind of stuff. And that one's the one that there are ways to come back from it, but it is down the path to not being able to come back from in a relationship with someone, meaning in the interrogation relationship. So you got to be careful not to go too far. That's it. Fear down is, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And you calm people down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you talk about, was that the one, in what book is it you talk about? Do you talk about fear up and fear down in that book? In which book was it where you talked about buying a car? Don't you say that in there?
That was liar. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't you use it?
Walking away. I've forgotten. It's been so long, Scott. That was my first book. But you can use fear up easily with people. Fear up of, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk out. That's a fear of sorts, but it's more about creating uncertainty. Interrogation techniques, remember, there's nothing natural about an interrogation, so you have to create a new normal, and you're creating environment in the interrogation room is all. Okay? Great questions, guys. That was Patricia, thanks. I'll try to remember everybody to say thanks at the end of each, but these are great ones. Bear with me a second as I refresh. I want to get some of the newer questions.
Oh, yeah, because if you're watching on YouTube, we're just answering from inside the body language membership community area in the live Q&A. So that's where we're answering the questions from. If you want to join body language membership, just go to bodylanguagemembership.com and you can get in there. We have a whole lot of stuff going on. This is just one of the things we do every week is doing a live Q&A, and it's on YouTube. It started because I couldn't figure out how to get it off. I guess I could now. I guess I really haven't gotten into it to find out how, but that's why it's on YouTube now, because we take it off of here and then replay it in the community, then replay it here. So That's what's happening.
Shira or Shira, not sure exactly how to pronounce your name. Sorry if I butchered it. What methods do you use to manage your own fight or flight when doing questioning? Well, everybody's got their own. So, Scott, I'll let you talk about yours. But what I do typically is you have a plan. And fight or flight's going to rise. It just is, because when your plan starts to fall apart, and they always do, you're going to be scrambling. And if you've ever watched the thing where I talk about a duck underwater, you see a swan, they look elegant gliding across the water, but you look underneath and their little feet are paddling like all hell. That's what your brain is doing when you're doing this. There's an old, in all business and everything else, there's an old saying that planning is useless, but any planning you do is a plan is useless, but planning is invaluable. That's true. So when you go in, you got a plan. And in intelligence interrogation, you have a written plan. As a matter of fact, junior interrogators have to hand their written plan to a senior interrogator before they go in, so they can look at approaches, length of time, how they're going to manage their site. All of those things matter. And so when you get in there and you find out that your approach is not working, you have to shift gears, you have to go down a different path, or the person brings up something that is a higher priority for intelligence collection than what you went in to find, your whole plan goes out the window. That creates stress, but if you do it enough times, after you've done your 100th interrogation, you kind of learn to expect that, and you can control it. And there are other tricks, like I always tell you about curling your toes in your shoes. It's about bringing your frontal lobe back online. And because everything you're doing is intellectually demanding, I think it gives you more of a chance to bring your brain back online anyway. Interrogation's pretty compound thing to do. You're looking at behaviors, body language, answers, timelines, stories. You have to be pretty on the ball to be decent at the job. Scott?
And one of the things that I do is I don't do the whole curl the toes thing. I act like I'm almost going to stand up. So I push, and I tried a couple minutes ago, and I'll do it right now. It makes you can hardly see it. I'll do it right now, because there I'm pushing down like I'm going to stand up while I'm sitting down, and that takes a lot. If you're really trying to do that, that takes all the muscles in your legs. It takes a lot of energy. It sort of focuses you down there as you try to cool off and keep your mind on it helps you zero in on what you're doing. Because instead of doing this or letting them see you squirm around, if you just start pushing up a little bit, then they're not going to see it, and your legs will get tired after a couple minutes, and you can let go, and you can try it again. That gives you something to do while you're trying to get your system to cool down, so you don't flip out, or you don't let this information that's incoming freak you out too bad. I think that was the question, sort of, too.
Yep. It's about how do you control your own. Let's see. Hi, this is from Yvette. Hi, you have done a few videos on the behavior panel about UFOs. Have either of you ever seen something you could not explain, or something that made you question yourself? Of all the people I would love to see something like that. Not that I really want there to be aliens, because we might be their cattle, but I'd love to see something like that that's not explainable. And maybe I won't when I see it, but I haven't. I've never seen anything. I have, however, known people with top secret clearances who swore to me that they were within feet of some kind of craft. And, you keep your top secret clearance through interviews and that kind of thing. So maybe there's something. I've never seen anything. Scott, you?
When I was little, we'd see these things that we thought were UFOs, how you are when you're little. And now I have that app that shows where the satellites are and what they look like. And you can go outside, watch the satellites pass over, and it was exactly what we were seeing. It was too far up to be an airplane, and it wasn't flashing or anything, and it was going fairly fast. And that's what those were. But I've never seen like a spaceship or an alien or anything like that, or a Bigfoot or anything. But have you ever seen a ghost, Greg?
Nope.
I don't think I've ever seen a ghost either. I'd like to see a ghost. I'm not sure there are any, but if there were some, I'd want to see. I wouldn't want one in my house or anything, but I want to go somewhere and see one. I talked to a guy one time who said he was, and I believe what this guy was telling me, because this is before, shows like Ghost Adventures. I watch that because it's like, the Three Stooges getting locked in a haunted house. It's these three guys that go in and look for ghosts in there. And of course, they never find one. They say they do, but they don't ever have a good picture of one. They have a lot of recordings. So this guy, so there's this thing called a shadow man, where, you're supposed to see the shadow of a person or something. And this is before this got popular. I think it got popular on those kind of shows. And this was years ago. And he said, man, we were hunting. And we were on the second floor of this house that was torn. That it was an old house and it was falling apart. But I was just up on the top because they were deer hunting. They would sit up there and wait for the deer to come out in the field, and they would shoot them, obviously. He said, but as I was sitting there, I was being real quiet. I'd been there for like an hour and a half, nothing happened. And I thought I saw something. I looked over where the closet was. I'm part of this wall, and this shadow thing man walked out, and he walked out to the edge of the house and disappeared. Didn't fall off. He walked out of there and then walked away and just disappeared. And that's the only time I've talked to somebody where I really thought they may have seen a ghost, because it wasn't until years later till I started watching those ghost shows. I said, that's what this guy's talking about. So, but I've personally never seen one.
Yeah, nor have I. Elaine asked a great question. I feel as if asking the right questions is a weak area for me. I missed the name of the gentleman you said was a great interrogator. Could you give us his name again? I'm mainly just interested in body language, but I need to also coach a student into admitting to having plagiarized a paper. However, I don't totally demoralize a student. Best. Let me see if I can find Jim's book handy, unless you have it handy. But
it's in my pile. Pardon the pun.
Anything from anyone, anytime. If Jim's there, Jim, write in the notes. If you're out watching us, he can't here. He'd have to do it out on YouTube.
I'm on YouTube. I can see it.
Yeah. So if Jim puts the name of his latest book up,
it's how to ask anybody. It's
how to ask. Yeah. I got it over here. I just got to go pick it up. If you bear with me just a second, you know what? We'll get it and put it in the notes. But Jim Pyle is James O. Pyle. Is the questioning guru. Jim was an instructor when I was a baby interrogator. He was working at the schoolhouse when I was going through the schoolhouse, and he knows this stuff inside out. He's got intellectual curiosity on a level that you rarely see in anyone outside of a child. And he can get just this tremendous amount of information from people because his style is not confrontational, and it's just dig information out. Eric Hunley did a great interview with him as well. So, yeah.
Find out anything from anyone, anytime. This is it. Wait a minute. Let me turn the brightness down on this, and I'll show it to you. There. That should work. Oh, shoot. Wait a minute. I got the wrong thing up. Dang it. There.
Yep. Great. Yep. Perfect. Thanks.
Great book.
The book is on the shelf behind me. I just didn't want to get up and turn my back.
Mine too. I can't get up and get all that stuff out.
Yeah. So somebody else asked a question. Charity said, if you had an interrogation room, you could travel in time to any historical period you're choosing, who would you interrogate? What kind of questions would you ask in order? Good question. I don't think I've ever really even thought about that. It probably would be, good question. Got to think about who is a monster in history you'd like to go back and talk to and figure out.
I know who I'd want to talk to and ask questions.
Who's
be about a story that I've wondered about forever, was Tesla. He said he was born one night when there was a storm and all these things going on, and what he envisioned as the first generator of electricity. He said he came to him in a vision and all that. So I've always wanted to talk to him about that. So that's the one I'd go back and talk to, is Tesla. Not in a mean way, but I would ask him tactfully. I would get to the bottom of it, since I'd be allowed to, since we're going to go back in time and all that. I'm going to set up those parameters as well. That, I can talk to him and he can't get away. I'm not going to beat him up or threaten him or anything. But I mean, we'll go in a little room and say, well, let's talk about this little vision you had. So I'd start there. That's what I'd do. Mine
would be, if I'm doing history, I would do probably Lee Harvey Oswald, to understand whether, was there conspiracy, if he was set up, all that kind of stuff. Because I think that will be an enigma for the rest of time to know exactly what happened, because most of the people who were involved, if there was more than him, are now dead. And if there were not more people than him, I want to know, what were you thinking? Why him? Why'd you do that? And there's lots of reasons people do. So, yeah, that would be an interesting one to me. I've read Body Language on the whole thing, and I have an opinion on it, and I put it in one of my last books. But yeah, I think it'd be a good one to do. It's funny. Patricia says, I'm obsessed with the Bigfoot documentaries. There's a great one that takes place in the UK. That's kind of the genesis of the behavior panel, honestly. And I'm not going to say there's no such thing as Bigfoot, but I see a lot of people who do it, who tell the story. And what I had said to Scott years ago is we should start a TV show where we bring those people in and grill them, because a lot of them would fold under pressure and say, I didn't see Bigfoot. But it's kind of the genesis of the show. Yep.
Then it moved on to ghosts and then aliens, or, UFOs. But so that's where it started, with the Bigfoot, because Greg called up, so what we ought to do? I was like, no, what? He said, we do need to do a channel on YouTube. We'll do some videos about people who've seen will people who will talk to people who have seen Bigfoot. So I went out and got a bunch of videos. I started collecting them. I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's at least talk about it. And there were some good ones. Remember that first one that I don't know if you sent it to me or I sent it to you, those guys by the van?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a feeling they were relaxing a little that day in the van.
There's a new one on Facebook, and I think it was supposed to have happened in Tennessee, and it is the worst. It is the worst example of somebody trying to be Bigfoot I've ever seen in my life.
Well, my favorite one is the Bigfoot hide in the cooler, if you remember that.
Oh, I remember that one, yeah.
It was bear DNA or something. So Norma asked a question. Hi, I'm trying to learn about dealing with a narcissist. My question is, how do I deal with a person who doesn't stop asking you personal questions? Well, two things. Number one is a direct question is the best way to ask. I'm sorry. A leading question is the best way to deal with anybody who just goes on and on and on. And those leading questions are have, did, will, are, can. Anything that forces a person to give you a yes or no answer, it allows you to redirect the conversation. I'll give you this as well. If you're truly dealing with a narcissist, it's really easy because all you got to do is start asking questions about them. They will tell you. You can keep them going all day. On a good narcissist, they're going to tell you all about, something in their life that you don't know, and they're going to aggrandize. So if you're truly dealing with a narcissist, just turn the conversation back and start asking about them.
And keep in mind, the reason they're probably asking you all these personal questions so often is they're gathering information about you. That's intel. So they're trying to find out all they can about you because it makes you easier to control once I know what you like and once I know where you want to go, what bugs you, things you don't like. I keep those away, and I find out what things are that you do like, so I can do things to fire off that oxytocin and serotonin. So when I cut it off and you're addicted to it, I'll know just what to let go a little bit of, so you'll come swimming back in, try to get some more, and go, yeah, that's the way narcissists do it, or one of the ways they do it. So they're probably collecting intel on you. So watch what you tell them.
Yeah, there's another good question here. Hold on, I want to make sure I bring it up and read exactly what. Yeah. Maria asks, do you have any tricks to tamp down your temper when you're interrogating someone? If you lose your temper during interrogation, you shouldn't be doing the job.
Yeah.
All of us can scream and yell and behave. I can go from zero to crazy angry like that because it's a skill. It's something you teach. It's behavior. It's acting. But if you truly are angry when you're interrogating, you shouldn't be in this business because you're going to hurt yourself or someone else or destroy your reputation. You just got to be careful. Anger is not a tool for the interrogation room. Pretend anger is fine if that's your approach, but it's like we said earlier, it's not as effective as actually most other things.
You're not getting anything done at all except getting rid of your anger and feeling better about it, I guess, if you're blowing off steam. But you've got a goal to reach. You're there for a reason. So you're there at the gas station to get gas, so you're not going to get upset when you're getting gas. You're going down to talk to somebody about getting your house painted or something. You're going to get mad at them. You're trying to talk this person into telling you what you need to know, to give you that information. So you can't get angry. You can't get real sad. You can't get real angry at all. You might have feelings about that person when you leave there, but when you're doing it, you don't get near that. You just go right down the thing because you don't want to have them against you. You don't want that person. They're going to be against you when you come in, but you want to turn that around and make them want to tell you what you need to know, get the information from them that you need to know. Again, Greg's been in those situations where it's not quite like that, and you sort of have to fake it. But I don't get many of those at all.
Well, and guys, if you go look around much on the internet, you'll see me being a bad guy. I mean, me screaming, yelling, me being pushy, me doing all that. And that's all a game. That's all what you need to do for that documentary or for that kind of thing. I've actually done just body language with I did for Nat Geo. I did a show called Going Ape Alpha Male, just by using body language and behavior, pushed to get the alpha to come out so we could actually demonstrate how alphas really behave versus what people think. And it was just words and poking and that kind of thing to get people to behave that way. And then there are a couple of others where, we're doing a specific thing, Gitmo rules, interrogation, those kinds of things. And the screaming and yelling, like I said, is not the most powerful tool. It's a cover for other powerful tools. And if you can get a person out of their thinking brain and into their cat brain, as I often say, then you're dealing with a cat, not a human. They don't have the rationale of a human. And screaming can do that. Lots of other things can do that. So it's about that in most cases when you're doing that. You're trying to change the way they think. If you get to the point where you can't think, you need to leave the interrogation room. That's how it works. And I'll give you a funny story. In my SEER days, there was a tall, red-haired female interrogator. I won't mention her name because she might not want it mentioned here. And we were to do a Mutt and Jeff, good guy, bad guy, whatever you want to call it, threat and rescue. And when we went in, we had a signal that she would touch her face, and then I would come and be the bad guy, snatch the guy around, because you do physical force at SEER school. And when I did that, she suddenly got really excited and came over and grabbed the guy by the collar, pushed me out of the way, and started snatching him around. And, she's my height, big woman. And this interrogator supervisor came and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, guys, this is supposed to be Mutt and Jeff, not psychos or us." And they pulled us out of the room and put somebody else in there. And it was not that I'd done anything wrong or she'd done anything wrong. She just got so animated and forgot the plan. And she just, went there. But where do you go from there? Two crazy redheaded people is what that guy's probably telling the story to his friends right now. Okay, let's see. What's next? You can keep us going, Scott, while I look for...
All right, that's about I had one loaded.
Here's a good one. Here's a good one. Marlou asks, do you guys have any book suggestions about analyzing statements? Oddly enough, we just met personally Peter Hyatt last week. Had a great conversation with Peter. We talked about a bunch of things. In his book, Wise as a Serpent, Gentle as a Dove, Dealing with Deception, is one of the most recognized in the business. Peter's a genuinely nice guy. We had a great conversation.
Yeah, I got that on Kindle, and it's Eric Hunley's podcast. That's on YouTube as well, called Unstructured. Go check that out. He's got everybody on there. So, and that's how we met. That's how I met Chase. Connected with him. He's one of the reasons the behavior panel started, or with these members anyway, because of Eric.
And Scott, as Scott says, we call him the fifth Beatle, right?
Yeah. So, I hope he's watching. I know he's in the membership.
Mike says, Peter Hyatt, when he was on with you and Eric Hunley, said a lie detector is 100% accurate if you ask the person questions in their language. Is that true for body language too? Do signs of stress show up if you use their language and personal definitions of words? So here's where we probably disagree. And, I said, even on that, Mike, if you were listening to that, I said a good interrogator, a great interrogator with a lie detector, with a polygraph, is effective. If you got a guy who doesn't know what he's doing, that thing is just a tool and it's just a boat anchor. But if you got a guy who understands how to question, who understands how to drive you into positions of stress, then it's a different thing. And to Scott will tell you in a minute how to beat it. But to me, it's just a great interrogator with a prop. That's all it is. And body language and behavior are the same way. None of that's 100%, in my opinion. I think that you can get real close, but I don't know about 100% in anything. With body language, you look for deception, you look for this. And remember, the first book I wrote, I was writing with a co-author that I've written all my books with, Marianne Corinch, and I was explaining this to her. And I called it kind of like taking an ice pick to a knight in armor. You're looking for a little hole that you can get that ice pick into and go after it. It's the same thing with all of this. It's kind of like unthreading a sweater. Once you get the point that you're after, then you can take the next step. But none of this works on its own. That polygraph gives him a place to go after, and then he can narrow the questioning and get it a lot tighter. But his point is you've got to ask questions that frame in a way the person feels stressed from answering them, is what his point is with that. I hope that helps. Scott? Yeah. And I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, Peter. I think that's what Peter meant there.
Yeah. I always say if you agree to do a lie detector test, the first thing you want to say is before you start, I'll agree to it if you bring me the person who's done this the longest. Bring me the oldest person you got to do it. I don't care if they're 74 years old. You bring that one in here, because that person's been around the block and they've seen a lot. And the lie detector test has everything to do with the person giving the test. So it's how they ask the question. It's when they ask the question, and they may look disinterested, like they're just asking you questions, but that's the key. So it's the way they do it. It's their approach. That's what sets these things off. That's what I would do if I was going to get somebody to if I agreed to it. And I would suggest if you do, you say, bring me the old, don't get some young person. He's 6 months out and he's been doing great. Nah, she's been out 2 years. Nah, you don't want that. You want somebody that's getting ready to retire. You want one of those, or who just came out of retirement. That's the person you want. You want whoever they bring you. You want the person that taught them or is above them or is leaving, because that's why that person's here. The oldest person you can get, that's the one you want. They'll get the closest to what's actually happening from you.
So Arinda asks, Is it harder to read someone who is one of those sensitive, suggestible people who mirrors everyone else's mannerisms? I'll just tell you, you got to jump. Every person you talk to, you have to adjust to. If a person's sensitive and loud booming voice doesn't work, often in the interrogation world, when you're working intelligence, we have many different personality types, from very quiet, meek people to very booming voice people. And each of those has a strength in who they talk to. Now, every interrogator should be kind of a bell curve, where their expertise and their capabilities are. But we often will match the best person with the other person. And you just got to calm down a little more, make your mannerisms a little smaller. We should be mirroring the source anyway when we're trying to get through them. And if this is a person in the street, you don't want to be attacking in the same way that you've seen like all these police. You did it, you did it, you did it. So because that person's going to ball up on you, and that doesn't seem to work. Scott, you got other things?
Well, there's somebody on YouTube, I just happen to look down here, and Sharon Drury, and she says, I can't find the body language live on Kajabi. That's where our courses are housed. You can't get into them from there. You have to join body language membership. Body Language Tactics is one of our courses we have, and so is the True Crime Workshop. And bodylanguagetactics.com if you want to go to that. The True Crime Workshop if you want to do that one. But bodylanguagemembership.com, that's where you go to get into the membership and to be part of that community and be able to watch these live and ask questions in there. You're watching it live now, but to be able to ask questions and communicate with us, that's the place you got to go. So that's why you can't find it there, because you have to be a member of that. So just put in bodylanguagemembership.com and it'll take you right to it.
So Julie asks, some of the behaviors you mention are present in victims as well as criminals. Please talk about how you differentiate stress, language softening, not having clear recall. Would love to see the behavior panel discuss this in an interview with someone innocent like Rouse Faria. There's even a recording of his 911 call. So this is where we get to exactly what we were saying earlier. And Scott, I'll jump in here and just do a short piece. Every time you're talking to somebody, you have to start looking for what causes their stress. Stress, and I say this all the time to people, there's not a difference. Human brain is not capable of doing a difference between getting your rear end chewed by an animal or by your spouse. We jump to all the time. We're pretty primitive systems in the way that works. Once you have that switch in your head, and we can go into biology, but not really important for this part of the conversation. Once that switch hits and the adrenal cortex kicks in and all that stuff dumps in your system, you're going to go to fight or flight. And that fight or flight can be caused by fear. It can be caused by something coming at you that you don't recognize. So we have to be careful to differentiate and figure that out. And when you say that the victim may have the same thing, you're dead on. Remember, we always hear people talking about how good the recall is for things that happened during a bad incident. It really isn't that good. The things that you notice are very good because you lock down on certain details and they're stuck. They're stuck in your head really hard. And sometimes that can be profound and negative. But you miss a lot of details when you're in that mode as well. Scott, you want to add something? And then I got another question for us.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on that one. If I could just add to it, I'd just be talking.
Let's see. There was one somebody asked last night, and I was trying to remember. Oh, yeah, I know what it was. And I'm going to see if I can find the actual question, but I can paraphrase, and I think it'd be worth covering. Bear with me a second. It's way down here. Take a second. You want to chat about something else? You want to give another couple of book recommendations while we're doing that, since we're here?
Oh, yeah. I know, and everybody always asks, what's the best psychopath book? Where you got to start? Psychopath 101 is with Robert Hare's book, Without Conscience. Great book. And there's one right after that called Snakes in Suits. He wrote that. He wrote that with somebody else, but that's a great one as well. That's where you want to start on psychopaths, Without Conscience. Great book. There are a lot of other great books out there, but you got to make sure it's not somebody writing a book that doesn't know what they're talking about, hasn't done the research. But I can guarantee you that Robert Hare, he's sort of the Elvis Presley of psychopaths. So that's the book to get. Start out with that one. Now, if you want to delve deeper into personalities or dangerous personalities, get Joe Navarro's book called Dangerous Personalities. Get it on Kindle if you got a Kindle. It's great. I always say get it on Kindle because I got Kindles. But then again, I got books over there too. But that's a great one, Dangerous Personalities.
Megan asks, do you ever help with depositions? Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, I used to make a joke about this, and people would say I'm available. People say I'm available for wedding and bar mitzvahs. We say we're available for divorces and will readings. Yeah, because those kinds of things are where our skills come in handy once you get into legal trouble or that kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. The question I wanted to answer from last night, I can't find the exact wording, but so Scott, go ahead and answer this one while I try to find the exact question.
Okay.
Scott, how did you get into this? Alicia asks.
I got into it when I was a little kid. My dad is a doctor, and he was a doctor, the only doctor in this town for a while, not the whole time, called Louisa, Kentucky. And so that's where my interest in it started, because one day my mom would come and she would take my sister and brother and I down a couple of blocks in this tiny little town to the hospital to eat lunch with my dad a couple of times a week. And I think I was in the second grade, and my sister must have been in the third grade or fourth grade. Maybe I was in the first grade and she was in the second grade, because my brother wasn't in school yet. And she would take us all down to eat lunch with him. And then one time we were in there eating lunch with him. I looked out into his little lobby, and there was two guys from my class in there. It was Robert Bellamy and Billy Elkins. And I said, I know those cats. What are they doing here? And my dad looked at him and he said, well, let's see. And he looked over and he said, well, Billy me. He said, Billy is, nothing's wrong with Billy. He doesn't, nothing wrong with him at all. He's pretending he's sick. So he didn't have to go to school. I said, okay. And I said, well, what's wrong with Robert? And he looked at Robert and he said, Robert has an earache and he's been up all night with his mom. So I'll probably see him first. And I said, well, how do you know this? And he said, well, let's look at Robert. And Robert had his hand on his ear, and he was leaning up against his mom, and he had a sad look on his face. So he said, see how his hand's on his ear? And I said, yeah. As a 6-year-old or 7-hour-old, you are at that age. I said, yeah. He said, see how he's leaning up against his mother? And I said, yeah. He said, and see how we knew her, to see how she doesn't look as made up and as proper as she usually does. She hasn't done her hair and stuff. And I said, yeah. Yeah. He said, well, that tells me she's been up all night and that he has an earache. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. And I said, well, what's wrong with Billy me? He said, well, take a look at Billy. Billy was sitting on this bench and he was reading like highlights or something, looking through that, and his legs were dangling. He said, see how his legs are dangling? And I said, yeah. He said, he didn't look too worried, does he? I said, no. He said, see how his eyebrows are up? And I said, yeah. He said, say, he's just looking through that magazine. Doesn't look like anything's wrong with him, does it? And I said, no, doesn't look like it. And he said, well, let's take a look at his mom. What does she look like? She had her lipstick and her hair was done and all that. We talked about that. I said, oh, okay. He said, now here's what's going to happen next. And this is my fascination. This is where it started in this situation with what's going to happen next with people. And he said, in just a second, in just a minute, his mother is going to look down at him and she's going to pat him on the arm, put his arm, pat him on the arm, and his eyebrows are going to go down and make a frowny face. And then he's going to look up sideways and he's going to talk to her and she's going to say something to him. And then she'll pat him again and he'll keep his frowny face on. Then he'll look back down at the magazine. Then his legs will start kicking again and his eyebrows will go back up. Well, within 2 minutes this happened. And I thought, oh my God, this guy's magic. How does he know this? Where do I learn this? However you say it as a kid. I was fascinated with it. So from that day on, he would say, what's wrong with this guy? And he'd be limping. It says his leg hurts. So he got his leg hurt. So he started me when I was a kid. I started learning that stuff really, really early. The obvious stuff that it's all academic. Anybody can learn it, obviously. I just got started early, and that's where it started. Was from my dad at the hospital. So
great story, Scott. I like that one. It's good to see that's an important part of medicine, and the reason I think it adds back. So we're at 3:53. I want to make sure we answer a few more questions. Aaron asks, are you guys paid for your appearance on news channels? Kind of an iffy question, being personal. I'm curious. Well, here's the thing about news, and I've done, God, I don't know how many different news channels. I've been on the CNN, NBC. For a long time, I did CNN almost exclusively because I'm local. And then things changed over at the station. I don't know anybody there anymore. But usually you're not getting paid unless you have something like a title that relates to their show. So we do it because it puts us in front of people. It gets more reach and that kind of thing. That's why most of us do it. And it's fun and entertaining. So that's...
Yeah, it has nothing to do with our politics, I can assure you.
For sure. For sure. So, because I'll tell you, if you ever want to know if it's our politics, just go look at my page at gregoryhartley.com. It's just a static page, but look across the banner. I've done about every major news network there is and lots of magazines and that. So the real test to do that is to be, somebody brought it up last night online, try your best to be disciplined and to talk about the body language, not the content. And it's tough sometimes because people want to drag you into that. Every time I do news and somebody wants me to make a comment about the politics, I say, that's not what I do. I do this. It's a tough one for people, but that's okay. The next question I had, and I want to make sure I cover this one. It was a great question last night that somebody said. Bear with me. Pardon me a second, guys. Yeah. Kathy asked, I'll have to watch the replay. My question is about memories being revised every time we access them. How does this factor into your assessment of truthfulness of a subject? When I first read about this, I didn't believe it. My memory recall was legendary among friends and family. Then looking back at my memories, I can see how bits of information change in memories over time and access. So let me give you one great example of that, and then I'll tell you how you have to combat it. The great example of that is, remember your childhood home, and everything will look big. Everything will look big. Or your school you went to. Now go there and walk. It's frame of reference. So the way your brain was there, next time you go there, the school will be the size it is now because you have adjusted that memory every time you go do something like that. But every time you go in, you're also adjusting with your frame of reference as the human being you are now. You're not the 3-year-old who remembered that. So your frame of reference is adjusting that as well. And there's no way to not influence it. In interrogation, one of the things you have to do, for example, when you capture prisoners of war and they tell you they walked 50 miles yesterday, well, you know that's not true, but it might feel like 50 miles. And so what you have to do is ask them questions. How much weight were you carrying? How much water did you drink? How many steps do you think it was from here to there? And what you're doing is getting a frame of reference, and that's viable in your daily life. Try to understand what influence the person was under at the time. And by that, I don't mean drugs or alcohol. I just mean, what were they dealing with? What happened? Exactly. Where were they going? For example, if you're talking to a person in an automobile accident, and you say, well, tell me how fast the person was traveling. Oh, they were driving 150 miles an hour, whatever. And then you find out that this person was in a hurry to get to where they were going, maybe not paying attention to details, and, things happen. So you got to get a frame of reference for where the person was in their mindset at the moment that happened to be able to start looking for their filters. That's part of what makes interrogation interesting, is because if people always told you facts, it would be great. But most human beings don't remember facts. They remember the story, how it felt, that kind of thing. And that changes the entire story. That's why a good interrogator is constantly referring back to the known to make sure that we're basing it on facts and not simply believing whatever we hear or filling in the blanks ourselves. Hopefully it helps. Scott, you want to add something to that?
When you in your eyes, there are 2 little blind spots. A lot of people don't know that, and you can do this until you see you can do this, and out in your vision, you can see where they're disappearing. Oh my God, I'm going blind. You're not. It's just there's these little blind spots in there. Most people know about it. Some people don't. But your brain fills that in for you, right? It doesn't leave blank spots there as you're looking forward. It just fills it in for you. What things should be there. And when it comes to memories changing, they don't change the whole memory. Like it wasn't a man, it was a woman, those kind of things. It shades the memory. So it's not huge changes most of the time, but it's enough to where there's no way you can possibly remember how everything looks and how everything moved and how everything sounded. So your brain sort of fills that in like it does those blind spots. That's the way I usually look at it and explain it. If that helps. Got time, I think we're for one more. Look at Greg all studying and stuff.
I'm trying to read.
Chewing on his mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there he is. He's smiling, everybody. You don't see that.
That's a rare thing, yeah. I'm looking to see.
Here's my imitation of you 80% of the time on video.
Just a DNA issue. It's just the way my brain's work.
I can't do it. I can't wait. It's not a frown. Yeah, there it is. Because your mouth just looks mean. I can't do it.
Hey, I'm glad to hear that, Monet, I think it is. I've been working with a very animated, angry patient the last few weeks. I used Greg's I Can Tell You're Upset line. It was very helpful. Thank you. You're welcome. It's one of my favorites. I call it No Public Displays of Stupidity.
It's tough to find a good one there, I know, toward the end.
Yeah, everybody's just making comments. Guys, well, we're at the end. What I would say is thank you for these questions. They're great. I picked up one from last night. I think it was fair because it was a great question. These are all great questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for joining us. And as we get back into this in community, if there's something you want us to notice, tag us, and we'll come in and occasionally just answer things. But if there's something we really need to pay attention to, please tag us. And when you hear us say, hey, let's keep this apolitical, we want everybody here to get along. We understand you have different views, and it's okay to discuss politicians' body language as long as it's not, he's lying scumbag and you start pointing fingers at blue and red and whatever. Let's try to keep it to that about the body language piece, and let us help any way we can. This is, for me, one of the more interesting times. As they say, there's an old curse, may you live in interesting times. The United States certainly is in interesting times, and civility is a tough thing, but let's just try to keep it there and keep our political views out as much as possible. Yeah. Thank you for all you do with us.
And remember, if you're on YouTube and you want to join, just go to bodylanguagemembership.com and come on in. We're having a blast in there. And but we really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. And everybody in the community, we'll see you in a few minutes, I guess, because we'll be back in there answering questions and stuff. So, all right, we'll see you in a bit. Get rid of this. Be just a second. Be patient with me.